Every characterful building always fights back. The greenest buildings are the ones that exist, not the ones you knock down and start again. I'm a strong believer innovation comes through the landlord, not the market, because the market's always backward looking.
The analogy of the things that I loathe is, this is a smart building. What's that?
What is that, yeah. So we're not here to do a checklist of we need X because it's just so cool. What's the value adding to that end user? Why are we treating customers so poorly as an industry?
Well, welcome to The Good, The Bad, The PropTech. I'm delighted today to be joined by Kilian, who is an investment director at Kinrise, who have a pretty unique perspective on investment thesis. And I'm really excited to talk about the wonderful world of innovation with somebody who deals a lot of time with buildings and specifically heritage buildings. So Kilian, thanks so much for coming along. If you could start by kind of introducing yourself and also Kinrise and a little bit about your role today, I think that'd be a good place to start.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Kinrise been going for 10 to 11 years now. We're a boutique investment firm operating across the UK with the sole mission of repurposing unloved buildings with the kind of objective there of, there's such a vast stock of unused, iconic and characterful buildings, and it's trying to bring them back into their former glory. So we do that through 4 lenses, which is human, social, environmental and financial. Where the first 3 obviously are the core principle of underwriting the financial piece.
Yeah.
But the human piece, for us, what that is how does the building and what we do correspond on a human level? So how do we make the space actually cater or allow the person inside of it or the companies to thrive?
Yeah.
Social, for us, that isn't just given to charity. That is actually how do we create community inside the building that is outward looking, and actually the building serves the needs of the people inside of it, but also the wider needs of the city. So It's more of an outward looking perspective.
Yeah.
The environmental piece, it's actually the easiest piece we find.
Good.
Because if you're repurposing, bring buildings back to their former glory, and you're only looking at existing, you've already won the green sustainability battle.
Okay.
The greenest buildings are the ones that exist, not the ones you knock down and start again. So we're wholly focused on whole life cycle carbon, not this race for, when I say race for carbon, I mean race for energy efficiency.
Okay.
Because we're transitioning from, the focus is carbon for sure.
Yeah.
But at the same time, carbon is now transitioning into energy.
Yeah.
So there's an element of what in environmental pieces, how do we use good technology to create good energy buildings? But looking at it from a whole life cycle perspective, not just the upfront carbon or operational.
Yeah.
And then lastly, financial, obviously we want to do this across the whole city, have impact across every city in the UK for the renewal of those cities as well. Yeah. Especially given the decentralization aspect that's been going on for the last 5 to 10 years from central government. So we really saw that thesis of there's very good returns and a very good underwritten basis of supply and demand in the regions. But at the same time, what is core to how we look at the financial is actually sustainable financial dependency. And that isn't just for our investors, but also for every stakeholder in the project or investment as well, coming down from the cleaners all the way up to the top. So things like the real living wage is really important to us.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we get good value from every stakeholder involved, whether the cleaner is actually really motivated and really loves cleaning the building, to the project team who actually don't feel like we're penny pinching the whole time to create this amazing product.
Okay. Wow. That's, I don't know, fascinating, but really interesting to hear. And everyone's got different lenses, as you say, that they look at from a real estate perspective. But there are quite a few things to juggle when it comes to selecting buildings. And I suppose probably also cities, because you guys have got, where are your buildings at the moment?
So we're currently across 6 cities in the UK. So we've purchased and repurposed, purchased and repurposed 14 buildings across 6 cities. So that's from London, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds and Liverpool.
Yeah.
Each one has its own identity, etc. But for us, location is the key driver there.
Yeah.
We focus on primarily the larger cities because the population, the employment, which obviously then draws the big companies and the demand that we effectively instill and need to make our appraisals work.
Yeah.
So And of course, if you want to have an impact in communities, you need to have that footfall.
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of a bit of a retail kind of analogy, but actually I think it applies even more so now in the office sector, where footfall is just as important, not just the kind of back to the office rhetoric, but also activation. You can't have activation if there's no one there.
Yeah. If you've got an empty building, it's hard to build a community with an empty building.
But we actually look at that one step further of actually how do you make that not just to the point about we want our buildings to be outward looking and serving the needs of the city, how do you then bring the public in as well? And how do you create that agglomeration of talent, but also interesting people where, you know, say a freelancer startup actually is able to meet a big investment bank in just a wider building.
Yeah.
Where in probably 99% of real estate stock in the UK, that just cannot manifest.
Yeah. Well, so in building communities, I'd start with that one lens because we're going to have to get into environmental and energy optimization, because you know that I will go into deep into that about the challenges I'd imagine with especially with a listed building. But communities, and I suppose the rise of communities and buildings probably was arguably given the title to WeWork as the brand that had co-working and this intermingling between businesses. But in the delivery of that, I would imagine there's obviously a people part of it, but is there a technology part too of how you bring it together, or
It's a fine balance between both of those.
Yeah.
You know, for us, our USP is human focused.
Yeah.
So every time we do look at tech, it's what is that UX for the actual end user, not just
user experience.
Is it a nice thing to have?
Yeah.
So we're not here to do a checklist of we need X because it's just so cool.
Okay, well, that's a shame.
Well, it's more what's the value adding to that end user. So, you know, whether it's a guest coming in to book a meeting room, for example, or whether it's just a guest going to visit an occupier, why should they have a different experience or a worse experience than actually someone who just works there every day?
Yeah.
So it's trying to create that experience of you belong regardless of who you are in that building. And I think there's an element then of the human part, which is then the activation bit, which creates that community as well.
Yeah.
Which technology, let's say, could be the enabler to open the funnel of how far and wide do you market the space, who potentially gets visibility of it. But on the ground, technology, as much as other than maybe, you know, sound, microphones, the kind of basic infrastructure stuff, is actually the people that make the difference. And it's the people that people remember. So every building that we've got in our portfolio, the person on that front desk or who runs meetings, everyone raves about them afterwards, being like, where did you find them? They're just amazing hosts.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bit where then suddenly people want to come back.
Yeah.
And, you know, our building in Birmingham, for example, you know, yes, we've created amenity spaces that are open to the public to book. But the feedback we get is not about the spaces, it's about the people.
That's interesting.
That kind of greet them, know them by name as soon as they walk through the door, but yet they've been there for the first time.
Yeah, which I think is, I imagine, recruitment and selecting those people, if you want them to buy into enjoying coming to work and working for you. On the digital side of it, trying to manage internal and external users from a digital perspective, I can imagine must have been a bit of a challenge to figure out how do we find the right platform that enables us to do that. Because typically we see that you have vertically specialized products that are really good at communities in multi-tenanted buildings, really good at co-working flex space, really good at visitor management. So like, if you had to go on that journey to find something that fits that hybrid to...
Yep, we spent 12 to 18 months looking.
Okay.
And never found what we actually wanted.
Oh, really?
So we ended up doing a square peg round hole. Square peg in a round hole.
Good. Okay. Like the honesty.
And, you know, it does it.
Yeah.
But the amount of subscriptions, amount of fragmented data you still have, it doesn't actually solve the fundamental issue that we always have with technology. Is you've just got this siloed, like you said, vertical system that just is very good at that specific thing.
Yeah.
But then as a manager of all these different systems, you're just tearing your hair out because it doesn't actually, it just makes more work, but in a different, well, the same amount of work, but in a different realm.
Yeah.
So where it used to be on Excel, you're now just across 5 different platforms.
Okay. I mean, that's a challenge that we have definitely seen when we go into audit buildings, that how many different things you need to actually run a building. Do you think that, is it still obviously part of your core thesis? So you're acknowledging that what you have is not perfect, but you know that if we don't have it, it's worse? Or if you could go back and do it again, would you build your own thing? Would you just go purely down to human and go back to Excel?
It's quite interesting. So when I say it's not perfect, it's not perfect for the back end.
Okay.
Our whole decision making is how do we make the UX front end as good as it can be?
Okay.
Within obviously commercially viable,
of course,
realms as well. So, the tech that we created is to create the best output for the occupiers of the building, knowing that operationally behind the scenes is actually not any more efficient.
You're going to have to shoulder the burden.
It's still
to give the experience
very manual,
person.
even though in theory it's tech behind it.
Yeah.
And that's just because there wasn't the right solution that actually did it all in the right way, in the right connection ways. So yes, I'd say there's an opportunity there, which I won't go more into, but it's more, there was that challenge. We came around it, but actually it's created more manual work. So we have thought about building ourselves.
Okay.
But at the same time, there's a degree of the scale that needs to happen. But obviously that's where the tech world now is actually really interesting, because you can actually build something for so much less than you used to be able to. And I think that's where actually the floodgates have opened.
Yeah.
Where actually there's very little excuse for that to be there.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the opportunity potentially, is that now you understand the importance of the user experience, but the limitations of the data. And actually then it gives you that blueprint to go, well, I know what I want. I just maybe have to go and build it myself because I can't buy it off the shelf, which is, exciting.
We're seeing across the market.
Yeah.
People are building proprietary tech.
Yeah.
But it's all within the kind of remit of, let's jump on the bandwagon of AI.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's done through a bit fear-mongering, actually, rather than actually knowing how it could be applied in a proper way. In terms of don't miss out, it'll drive efficiency, productivity, you can do more, etc., which is so correct. But it's within reason.
Yeah.
And I think it's, property inherently, it's not a complex data set.
Yeah.
It's quite simple numbers added together, divided, etc. AI has a huge role to play in making things efficient.
Yeah.
But let's not step away of it. It's just a SQL database at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the realization of that AI is probably more of an output tool than it is actually the driver.
Yeah. You have the opportunity to take these different systems that you are currently siloed and potentially put them together and drive insights, not data, which is obviously what everyone actually wants. They don't want 5 different dashboards in the back end. They want to just know, well, whether it's write a prompt or have it given to you in a way that makes things more efficient as opposed to less.
Yeah.
But also potentially means you don't have to go back through your 18 months of procurement and onboarding and training and go, let's rip all this out and put a new shiny thing in. Actually, you can leave the machine as it is working to a certain extent and then leverage another piece of technology to drive insights.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's also, it's behavior.
Yeah.
Everyone has their learned behavior and no one wants to change. And I think that's where AI is really pushing them into, okay, we actually have to think about what that behavior now is.
Yeah.
To think about what is the new world, and we can't be left behind. And that's exciting, but actually it's just pushing them to where we were, let's say 5-10 years ago, not actually to what the true extent of AI could be.
Yeah.
And, personally, I'm still a bit skeptical on the role of AI in property itself, because inherently it's property's simple database style setup. But there's so much it can do to make the actual administrative processes so efficient.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting bit that I see in that kind of how AI could actually be used to actually be more productive and actually do more deals quicker.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say more accurately,
Okay.
because I think that's where the human factor comes in, because there's too many assumptions to just rely on AI to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all about risk at the end of the day. And speaking to other kind of peers in the industry, it's the risk management using a system that has no accountability, has no auditability, and can hallucinate. It's so scary.
Yeah, you've got to very much go into eyes wide open, as opposed to thinking it's the holy grail silver bullet you've been looking for a long time. Because if you got something that can make something up, that's a risky factor that you can't put your investment thesis on, because when they ask, how did he come to this outcome? It's like, I didn't, something else did.
Exactly. And that's where it gets quite interesting with FCA, any FCA regulated entity,
Yeah.
FCA are quite wary about AI because of the hallucination and auditability factor.
Yeah.
So how the industry gets around that is going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. I'm glad we got into AI so quickly as well. We'll definitely come back to it. No, I think we talk a lot about that property technology has never had the marketing that AI has, and that a lot of people's maturity and wanting to becoming data curious because of AI hopefully will lead to why don't I have this data? Well, it's because you haven't got the technology in your building. So we see it as, whilst the industry of innovation and tech's been there for a while, it hasn't pushed its way onto the board paper level of things. It's still in a dusty FM's office. And hopefully now, with people wanting to have more data about the buildings, they'll say, well, let's go back and find out why I can't see my energy consumption, my occupancy data, my NPS score, whatever it might be. And hopefully that will then drive innovation back down the chain into our assets, is my hope.
I agree. I think the challenge there is how do you bring it out of the asset into the actual investment management capital markets piece?
Okay.
Because I think for me, that's where it needs to start.
Okay.
Because if the capital isn't driving it, they won't care about the property output.
Well, that's a very interesting point for me. In the due diligence, clearly you guys are buying value-added sites that are typically either vacant, run down, or potentially going to be repositioned. In your thesis of buying a building, do you look at the existing technology stack, or do you just assume that you're going into a building having to replace what's there and update it with what you want?
I'd say 90% of the time it's the latter.
Okay.
Purely because we typically look at existing rundown buildings and make them good again. So usually that is implementing new technology in a shape or form. We have done up buildings, but it's very much like that doesn't work, or they VE'd that system too heavily to the point where great, I now need to do a workaround to actually get that data back out. So there's been a lot of that. And it's about control.
But is that part of your due diligence process, I suppose, when you're looking at assets from an investment perspective? Is the technology part of it a consideration, or is it a case of all the other risk factors, the tech stack of a building is a pretty small one, so it's not moving the needle? Or is it something you've gone through the pain of knowing what you're going to spend? Is it on the to-do list?
I think, sorry, by answering your question like a politician, it's actually, we look at it more from what is the exit way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like I said, 90% of what we do is more putting those systems in. So we're looking at what actually does the end user, but also the end buyer want to see.
So would you then include it in the end buyer deck for that building to actually highlight something to go?
Yeah, we would.
So it is part of we've done these things, and the digital side of what we put into this building is actually should be considered valuable to you, next purchaser.
So our fundraising packs now include the extent of our tech stack and actually the output rich data that it produces.
Wow. Yeah.
Whether that's heat maps correlated to energy, CO2, VOCs, but also dwell times.
Yeah.
So, we can see across our buildings, like who uses what space to what density on what days and what half-hourly slots, etc., and how that corresponds with other things. Obviously, there's a FM optimization aspect to it, but for us, is our building being used?
Yeah.
If a break's coming up 9 months out, are they using the space? Yes or no? And there's a degree of, the capital markets, as much as that's useful to know, is actually, it kind of doesn't change the underwrite per se.
Okay.
Because if you're a lender, you'll only underwrite to a break date anyway.
Yeah.
So whether they break or not, that's then, if they don't break, that's upside for the equity.
Yeah.
So that's where the disconnect is of, if that data was to potentially feed into the lender framework of actually, when you're doing your investment cover ratios, you can look after your break because we know they're using it heavily.
Yeah.
That would be quite interesting. But
how you turn,
but it's risk management. Back to my former point of why would the lender take that risk on data where that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because you could use it to the last day and then just account.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah. Which is, the frustration of it is that, my frustration is that actually what an incredible insight to give someone beyond a termination date on a lease and actually showcasing that to them. But if they're not able to do that to the 100,000 other buildings they underwrite, they have no benchmark of comparison. They have no centralized data set to go, we have now seen a correlation between if the occupancy is over 70% for a year prior, the chances that break is lower. Therefore, the risk is lower, or, which we can capture. But if you can't compare every building on the same standard, you're sort of the outlier anomaly, which means they can't factor that in.
And I think a good scenario of that is like the Flex guys, the WeWorks and the like.
Yeah.
That data's rich, because if a startup, let's say full desk office, if they're not in there, it's a key sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you've got a 10,000 square foot office, decanting out of that is not easy. They're going to have to start their search 9 months ago. You'll know they're in the market before your break notice period expires, etc., etc. So I think it depends on the stock you're talking about as well.
Of course, yeah.
Because, our buildings have everything from 8-person, fitted offices all the way up to 30,000 square foot floor plates.
Yeah.
And to create those comparisons between that variety of space, between Cat B or Cat A, is actually quite difficult, because they have different behaviors per company.
Of course.
Which then goes into what sector they're in, which changes that as well. Which
is, I suppose, some of the challenges of, because of all these nuances, that sometimes people just go, well, what's the point in going for the effort if it's not a very clear ROI and we can't demonstrate it? But you've obviously taken a slightly different lens, which is the more we learn, the more data we get, the more valuable we'll be able to drive by looking at these things, because we have access to it, which other people might not have access to today.
I think, it's intel for one, but it's intel to drive this building so well used. The risk of it is lower, therefore the value of it should be higher.
Yeah.
Not from an NOI perspective, but more from a covenant income security perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think a couple of pounds on the NOI is going to be dwarfed by potential 2 basis point compression in yield.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's that kind of, for us, it's that fight. And I think, we're private equity structured business. So a lot of our schemes, they are underwritten on a 5 to 6 year hold.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have the flexibility to hold it long term, because we invest on behalf of high net worth individuals and institutions. So we have full discretion on kind of how we operate our buildings.
Yeah.
But there's an element of what actually drives bigger value from an actual red book perspective. Is it just NOI leakage reduction, or is it creating something where you're fighting at the top tier of the market and you're getting that yield, sharpest yield you possibly can?
Yeah. Which is,
And I think in this market, that's even more prevalent, because you're either at the top or you're secondary, tertiary.
Yeah.
Like the gap is now so vast for, something that isn't right at the top, new, shiny, etc. Everyone will just lump that into the bucket of everything else.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge from an investment perspective of technology is great if you're fighting at that top tier. At the bottom tier, it then gets difficult, because that capitalization impact is massively eroded.
Okay. So do you think then in the secondary market, they're going to really struggle to find a way to embed innovation or technology into their buildings, because of the top end value of the building means that investment might not make sense?
I think obviously there's an inherent shallow market in the capital market as well. Investment volumes are at historic lows, even compared to the GFC. So putting in that context, no one's wanting to sell, because the values don't stack up for them.
Yeah.
So everyone's just holding out for the market to come back. So, people are looking to, okay, how do I upgrade buildings?
Yeah.
So I'd say I wouldn't say there's hesitancy to invest in how do I improve the existing stock, but they are doing that out of, what do I do with it? Because otherwise I'll be left behind even worse than if I don't do anything.
It's a defensive position, not an offensive, as it were.
So I think that's where it's just an interesting market.
Yeah.
To tackle that question, because I don't think it's a normal market.
Yeah. Okay. So you can't look at previous trends, because we're in something that is fundamentally new for everyone.
And where is it going? I think the normalization is you need to have fantastic amenities that's well connected, and the UX is great. I think that is the new normal.
Yeah.
And if you're not fighting in that category, you're probably not. You might do okay, but you won't do fantastic.
Yeah.
You won't be considered prime in the market. Your liquidity will be a bit lower, and you won't get the cheapest cost of capital.
Yeah.
Except
bold. I think I don't want to go into this too much, otherwise I think we'll spend all day about that, because I find it really fascinating. And obviously the lens that we look at is in technology innovation, not necessarily investment, but ultimately the investment drives the decision-making tree down the line all the way to the cleaner or the FM teams, which is inherently what's going to drive their appetite or desire to embed or upgrade buildings to what they're doing. But one thing you touched on with the lens, which I think is an important one to come back to, is on the sustainability part of it. And there are several hundred different energy optimization solutions. There's a myriad ways of solving it. How have you guys kind of addressed getting optimization technology into listed buildings? Has it been easy, a challenge, an opportunity?
Every characterful building always fights back.
Okay.
So within that context, it's never easy.
Yeah.
And it's not because putting a VRF system is difficult. That's not the hard bit. It's the existing fabric. That's always the issue of, can you actually, yes, you can put the condenser on the roof, you can put fan coils on the floor. It's the bit in between. No one knows until you actually start.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's always a degree of, it's not difficult to do.
Yeah.
It's the unknown that, no one's willing to take the risk on.
Okay.
So obviously that's why we love it. Those buildings, because they're not just, well, we're forming a new riser. It's you're using an existing, and you have no idea actually, does a dog leg on the second floor, or is it just a straight drop? No one knows. And every building has a story of that ilk, and nothing's ever as built or drawn on O&Ms. Like, if O&Ms were accurate, it'd be a lot easier. But that's for another day.
Yeah. Another day, another product as well.
Exactly. So, for us, it's putting the technology in isn't difficult. We bought a building a year after PC of the base build, and we changed the whole access control system.
Okay. Why?
Contractor was like, why are you doing this? It's a perfectly fine system. But it wasn't a cloud system. It had no data outputs. It was just basic kind of card fob system. And that's it. To the point where we couldn't collect occupancy data. We couldn't link it up to wider tech platforms. Like I mentioned, the tech stack we had.
Yeah.
And that's a really basic one that we put in. But actually the data on the back of it suddenly meant, when we went through our smart score assessment on that building, all of a sudden they're like, oh, like just that system, 5 ticks. I don't know if it was 5 ticks, but it kind of
felt like 5 ticks.
It felt like 5 ticks because the data output and then the integration into other systems meant the UX was clean.
Yeah.
You didn't need to wait 3 months or 3 weeks for cards to be delivered.
Yeah.
To the point where as soon as you sign that lease, you can get into your space. End of story.
Yeah. It's one of those barriers to user experience going, why is this painful? It's like, oh, I've ordered them. They're coming from somewhere. And also the very basic nature of a simple plastic key card is not very great for the planet on the basis that you go through 30, 40% of them a year on people losing them and replacing them, which is wholly unsustainable and inefficient.
Yeah. But the challenge is not everyone has a smartphone. So we did develop a building in Birmingham and we put good tech in cloud access control. We had a tenant sign up for a 10-year lease, give or take 25% of the building. Half their employees didn't have smartphones.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're not giving out cards. And they're like, well, I can't get in. I literally have this old Nokia.
Yeah.
And literally you're standing there like, I'm going to have to go back on the whole premise of what I'm trying to market here.
Yeah.
And I think there are those occupiers, and I think you can't cater for all.
No.
But there's an element of the ones who did want to use the system in terms of the digital key. It was awful. And I know things have moved on since then.
Of course.
And, I think any Bluetooth setups in app just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, we'll never do that anymore.
Yeah.
We've done it now in three buildings. It's just a bad experience.
Yeah. But that shared learning, I think, is so important for those that haven't tried it. I mean, we still meet people that have never heard of mobile access control being a thing, right? Whereas you're kind of looking at the base build day one of understanding, I think the understanding the value of it from a user experience perspective. I think the part which we see is what you described very eloquently, but if you roll it back into the construction development process of that building that you took over, if you look at access control as a security subcontractor with a cost and a budget, and we just need to get a security system in this building, that's it. Find the best and cheapest thing that's secure, whatever it might be. But if you approach it in the way that you do, which is, this is a piece of technology in my building that can give me occupancy data, and it can give me smooth user experience for people to be onboarded, and it can be a point of difference potentially between other buildings, you suddenly don't have a value engineered, cheap spec thing at the end of it, because you've articulated that actually by investing or holding that budget in the construction phase and not just seeing it as a necessary evil, whether it's an accreditation or whether it's what the data you get out of it. I think sometimes people miss those opportunities of actually this one piece of technology has multiple values, as opposed to it just being a whatever the cheapest thing is, just get it in.
I think that's right. And, but that's where the challenge of the capital markets comes in. Because for me, the system they put in was a clear VE.
Yeah.
It's that like,
value
we need to save money, this investment's in trouble, let's just go for that system.
Yeah.
That's kind of, when we were buying the building, it was so obvious that, that wasn't the only scenario where they did that. There was quite a few.
Yeah.
It was a distressed scenario.
Fine.
Hence why it makes sense, but that's why we managed to buy it.
Yeah.
But, I think there's so many challenges there because, yes, UX is important there. Don't get me wrong, we put the access control system in. I don't even use the occupancy data anymore because I've got a better system.
Okay.
Because tech just evolves and you realize actually tailgating access control is more common. If you go out for coffee, you're not typically going out on your own. You go out as a group or pairs.
Yeah.
So you're not both going to tag in unless they're a speed gate.
Yeah.
But not every building justifies a speed gate.
Of course, just for that piece of data.
Exactly. So there's really interesting tech out there where without actually anyone knowing, how many people are in there, regardless of access control, etc. Getting that data is the hard bit.
Yeah.
As anything. But there are a lot better ways to do it. But then, take the building that we're at. It's, yes, it had VRF, heat recovery, etc., etc. Efficient wise, it was, EPCB, had BREEAM in use, excellent, etc. And it was a grade 2 listed retrofit that was done. We probably spent, I wouldn't say as much as they did, but a significant amount of what they ended up doing as part of the retrofit in redecorating, fitting it out. But all of a sudden, the ERV increases over 20%.
Yeah.
By just doing that.
The rental values of the building went up by 20% for the cosmetic works that you guys did.
But I would say it's more driven by the cosmetics than it was by the technology.
Yeah.
And the technology, sorry, I know you didn't want to say that.
No.
But I think that's where the agency market isn't catching up on actually what is the value of that tech.
Okay.
And agents are fantastic at selling the real estate. But I don't think they actually understand the technology behind it to the extent where they can understand what does that mean for the occupier in true value terms.
Yeah.
So,
subject close to my heart, Kilian. Very close to my heart.
But that's why we as an investment manager, but also asset manager, we now put ourselves in as joint agent on deals.
Okay.
Because who can sell the building and the systems that are in it better than the people who've actually specified it and put it in?
But so do you find is the technology part of it part of your rhetoric to an occupier? And are you volunteering the information to showcase how good the space is? Or are they asking for the information?
I force it on them.
Okay.
That's a blunt way of saying it.
That's
but
fine.
I lead on it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of occupiers, especially in smaller buildings, not the kind of
30,000 square
30,000s, the big guys, they know what they're talking about. I think it's the sub 5,000 square foot where they don't really want to look at real estate. They know they just need an office.
Yeah.
So they're the parties where education is the important bit.
Okay.
But then you could say, but we're white school platinum. I don't know what that means. And I was like, well, I've got 2 diverse lines coming into the building. They're like, again, don't know what that means. I was like, you can get Wi-Fi anywhere in the building on a fully secure VLAN, whether you're in business lounge or what we call the commons or in your office or in reception, you get full coverage and you're fully secure. And they're like, oh, that's useful.
Yeah.
So it's just how you pitch it. But then
it's meeting people at what's relevant to them, not what is relevant to somebody else.
Yeah. But property inherently is very much what badge do you have? What accreditation do you have? Not actually how's that applied.
Mm.
And I think it's that educational bit of humanizing it for those occupiers is what we find actually creates value.
Yeah.
And the amount of deals we get that previous representatives have actually discounted is quite interesting, purely because of they just aren't aware of what the space is actually doing for them.
So you've been able to rekindle a deal by explaining to them the investment you've made into the digital user experience alongside fantastic design and beautiful listed buildings, but showcasing that.
It's one of many of the characteristics.
But it is something, it's on the list as opposed to not on any list.
It's on the list of there's a wider vision here and technology is a big role of it.
Yeah.
But it is part of the wider UX that we're doing. And I think that's where actually the story behind something actually carries so much more weight in those conversations.
Yeah.
As long as it's backed up by technology.
Yeah.
Because the story with then the substance at the end always hits a chord.
Yeah.
I think just the substance at the end, you'll be like, okay, but why?
Yeah.
Because the vision isn't explained to them.
Yeah. But I think also the analogy of the things that I loathe is, this is a smart building. What's that?
What is that? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you just explain to me in layman's terms of what that actually means for my business and my operation?
And I actually don't I've done smart score once now across our whole portfolio, because I think historically, and I would say to a degree, I still think a lot of it is just a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
Where it's like, but you need to just have that and then you get your minimum requirements. And it's like, okay, but what's that giving the occupier or me as a manager of that building portfolio? What's that giving me? And they're like, yeah, but if we're going to assess the top tier smart buildings, it needs that. I'm like, okay, but what value is it bringing though? Like who actually needs it? And it's always that challenge of having something for the sake of having it.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get that best accreditation versus actually it's completely unnecessary tech.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we always look at it. It's like, well, yes, we've got that. Let's target that. Actually, we're looking at it from a UX perspective, not a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
So we don't start with the assessment scorecards, for example. We take it as like, okay, this is the experience we want to create.
Yeah.
How does that mirror onto the scorecard? And most of the time, we get a good score.
Yeah.
But there's elements where they're like, and again, I know this is going to be painful for you, but it's like the BMS is typically not a priority for us because it's not actually a UX item.
No.
And I think because it's not UX, why would a tenant want to pay for it?
Yeah.
I know that's controversial.
It's
I know
not
there's
controversial,
efficiencies, but that's the hierarchy that we see because, that building where we put a lot of tech in, BMS was broken when we bought it without knowing it.
Yeah.
To the point where it was the most complex BMS, and over a year on, we're still fixing it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to replace it because they're too expensive and I paid for an operational thing. But then it had no metering strategy, had none of that. So putting that into BMS that was already not working, I'm like, well, okay, we need to put separate gateways in now.
Yeah, yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like the efficiencies and that kind of smart way of looking at it just falls off a cliff edge quite quickly. And you're doing it from a presentational perspective rather than an operational.
I suppose not in defense of, because I wouldn't do that, but I think there are still people that need a tick box because they don't know what the boxes are as a starting place. I think buying something to achieve an accreditation with no clear desire to do it is something we see all too often, where you go into a building that's full of technology that's not being used by anybody. Also, I've seen a lot of BMSs. They come in all different shapes and sizes, and how that transfers value into it is probably mainly comfort, but I would assume that most occupiers would assume that their building will give them optimized comfort. And that's probably maybe the best of what a building management system could do.
Yeah.
It's a very clever start-stop clock for a building, which you may or may not need depending on the asset complexity. But I would definitely not start a viewing tour going, this building has a BMS.
Yeah.
Because the person would be like, what on earth are you talking about? And what is that? Let alone, shall I take you to the room the BMS is in and I can show you the data? It'd be like, no, I'm okay, thanks. Let's go to see the roof terrace.
But then, the BMS in my reduce your energy consumption by 5%, say.
But that's what our building will run 5% more efficiently than the next one you've been to see or the one you've just come from.
And that's the challenge that I have at the moment. And it's conversations I've been having over the last 12 months of when agents go to occupiers.
Yeah.
When they report, very rarely do they say, okay, this building is this efficient from kilowatt hours perspective. Therefore, your occupational costs are this much lower, because they just don't put utilities in as a factor in occupational cost analysis.
So it's rent, rates, and service charge.
Typically, yeah. And I'm not saying they don't put utilities in, but they standardize it typically across the board. They just put like a nominal £4 per square foot or something in. Like, I'm just putting that number out there. If that was scientifically, it's like, well, that building is proven to be X, that one's Y, et cetera, because EPC is not going to do that for you. EPC is not fit for that. So how are we going to actually judge that scientifically, where then all of a sudden it's like, well, actually, to be in that space, it is £2 cheaper because they're running so efficiently. Therefore, why shouldn't they be paying £2 more in rent? All of a sudden, the value in that sustainability comes through. But I don't think the education piece, but also how tenants look at it, is there yet.
Which, it sort of leads on that perfect question of who should be leading the conversation with innovation. Is it the owners? Is it the operators, or maybe in your verticals, agents, or is it occupiers? So do you think it's the landlord's responsibility to drive innovation and engagement in it? Or do you think you have to wait to be asked for it by an occupier to deliver it?
That's a multi-tiered answer, because I don't think it's that simple.
Yeah.
In terms of just one answer, as much as I want it to be. I think innovation, I'm a strong believer innovation comes through the landlord, not the market.
Yeah.
The market's always backward looking, typically, unless you get a very good team. It's kind of, that worked really well, let's just replicate that and maybe just change this or that, rather than actually, I'm going completely left field. This is what the new thing is.
Yeah.
And kind of standing behind that because it is cool and awesome. And you need to have quite a big conviction for that. And I think that's where at Kinrise, we come into our own because we have that conviction, because we know the UX is going to be worth the non-standard approach.
Yeah.
Because when we bought the building, everyone's like, why would you do what you're doing? Perfectly fine. Soon as we then revealed it, everyone's like, I get it now.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, I want to go in and see it. So why is that now considered the best space in Birmingham, etc.? Outside of obviously Paradise, kind of the 30,000 square footers. So it was just a very interesting, everyone's kind of, I'm not going to say being rude, but it's like no one got it.
Yeah. They couldn't see what you guys could see.
So it's like we were buying it, rental advice was low. They're like, well, it works perfectly fine. It hits all these targets. And I'm like, but it doesn't work fine. There's fundamental flaws in how it operates. Did it, all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, yeah, your rents are up here. Everyone's suddenly coming and we're hitting very good rents.
Yeah.
So sorry, to answer your question.
No,
I think innovation, I would argue, is predominantly needs to be led by a landlord, because they need to look at the end of the day, their security, which is their asset.
Yeah.
So if they want to make a return, they need to put that investment in. And not just, I think they need to take accountability for it as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's an element of, you can listen to professional teams too much to the point where you're overpaying for stuff. Because I think a lot of projects are over-engineered by consultant teams.
Yeah.
Because of the driver of, let's just cover PI, let's hit BCO targets, and let's make sure nothing can come back on us.
Yeah.
And I know that's controversial, but we see it far too often.
Yeah.
It's very much just like, let's wipe our hands, do what everyone knows happens, and the consultant team won't innovate because they don't want to take the risk.
Yeah.
So I think that has to be led by the client or investor.
Yeah.
There's then an element of the educational piece needs to be led by the agency world. That's why we're putting ourselves in alongside them, because it's like, well, who's going to start that education bit of making sure they pitch it correctly?
Yeah.
With that tech and vision and UX.
Because if you've gone through the effort of pushing the innovation, standing behind it, getting it into it, potentially spending more money than others might do on this part of it, and it's not communicated to the end customer, all of that effort that you put into it stays behind the scenes and isn't part of the user experience conversation,
Exactly.
which clearly in what your experience you've had so far has moved the needle.
And we've shadowed way too many inspections, etc. with our
But
teams.
your agents love you.
They still get paid. So it kind of, for me, it's a value add because it actually pushes more people through the door.
Yeah.
It tells a better story to the point they're more engaged.
Yeah.
To the point it's not just like a quick no. It's like, oh, this is really interesting.
But you have to present it in a way that's interesting. If you said we've got wide score and we've got BREEAM and that's it, and it's a smart building, the person will kind of not know what those three things really are, and therefore will attribute no value to them because there's no story behind the journey of, and also the value to them.
Every agent's on 10 buildings plus.
Yeah.
You know, there is an inherent conflict to some degree of which building are they pushing first.
Yeah.
To the point where ultimately the control and accountability lies with the investor. If an investor's like, why is it taking longer to lease? It's not the agent who has to justify it. They might to a point, but they've got no skin in the game.
Yeah.
So accountability always comes down to it, and risk.
I think from the lens that we've seen from the consultancy hat, so the over-engineered people, we probably put ourselves in the bucket of when someone goes, oh, we're a digital building consultant, the sort of eyes roll of a great another one, you know, another person chipping into all these things to do it. But we've certainly experienced what you're describing as the performance gap between design specification and operation. And it's sort of the best known issue in buildings, but kind of the best ignored. We all know that when we design and complete a building and commission it, it will run hopefully to the design standards for a period of time. The first occupier that moves in will mess around with everything, and then the whole system will be thrown out, and then it'll be a constant chasing your tail to get anywhere near to where you started. And that's why there's so many platforms out there that just shine a light on things that a human could do, the technology just brings to the fore.
Yeah.
It's, you know, but it still seems to be a rhetoric of, can we go and ask the questions of, what are you doing behind the scenes before I come and take this office? And that's why the educational part potentially we see is getting an occupier to be clued up enough to interrogate the person on that viewing to say, hey, I don't care about these accreditations, but I do care about these things of tech that is relevant to my operation.
But I think that's what tenant reps, they need to be leading the education piece.
Yeah.
Because if a tenant rep's not challenging their client of, how do you use your existing space? How many meeting rooms do you need? How many microwaves do you need? You know, you could have one microwave and your energy consumption will be tiny. Or you could put 4 in and all of a sudden it's a material move. You know, I don't know, it might be more than 4, but it's kind of, you know, it's actually hard for a landlord to be like, how am I going to specify a Cat A space? It could be a call center and suddenly the energy bill is huge. Or it could just be, you know, let's say a consultancy who, you know, 50% are always out and about on site visits or meetings elsewhere. You know, you can't compare the occupational costs from a energy consumption perspective for those occupiers, which makes it hard from a base spec perspective in the first place. But then if that building is running efficient and that tenant rep isn't aware of, okay, I'm actually scientifically going to be like, we know that tenant in the previous 2 buildings has run at X kilowatt hours per square meter.
Yeah.
How efficient is the other building? And therefore, as a joint energy consumption, we're over, actually there's a saving here. Suddenly that building becomes more attractive, et cetera, et cetera. So at the moment, everyone's like, I'd say, hunting the green badge without actually seeing the commercial value in it.
Yeah.
Other than the service charge piece. But the service charge piece in the big picture is tiny.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the challenge often, is that service charge and utilities are a relative business cost that is important, but it's not the 90%, which is people, which is why I think the amenities and the feeling of a building is typically the one that is the emotive driver. And even in an office space, which is, it still seems strange that emotion is part of it, but it is. And it's actually it's the fine margins that do make a difference and could help swing a deal one way or the other, which should be articulated in a way that is, you know, interesting, digestible, but, you know, will actually potentially make a difference between one building being viable and not. And yeah, I suppose half of it is knowing the right questions to ask as well, right? Is the educational piece, which is super interesting.
And I think, you know, part of that, the human approach is, who also is your landlord?
Yeah.
You know, I think that doesn't get asked enough either. Are you just dealing with the managing agents? You know, too many buildings we bought where the tenant actually comes to us like, oh, we've never actually dealt with the landlord before.
You mean the customer has never spoken to the landlord?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, we've only gone through the managing agent.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, but what was that experience like?
Yeah.
Everyone knows that answer. So
yeah.
it's more, it always surprises us every time we get that, but it's so common.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's where is, who are you actually talking to? Who has that invested interest?
Yeah.
And I think across our portfolio, everyone's always surprised. It's like, actually, the decision makers are the people on the ground that you go and have a coffee with every other month or so. To the point where, you know, us actually being present in facial terms with those occupiers is actually really important to us.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, if there's an issue, they're not going to come to you. It'll be buried somewhere in a report that comes out every quarter. And as an investor managing a portfolio, you'll just skim over that probably.
Yeah.
Just be like, I'll just deal with it.
Yeah. It will be a ticket issue log raised, processed, not processed, PPM.
And, you know, I'm generalizing here to
of course,
a degree,
yeah.
But I think it's that if you stop looking at it from a tenant landlord relationship and you kind of, let's say, amplify it and look at it as a customer, why are we treating customers so poorly as an industry?
Yeah.
But that's a human focus where technology supports it.
Yeah, love it. I think it leads on very nicely to my final two questions, and I will re-ask you it so you can have another crack at the who should be leading it. But we've covered a lot of technologies, but what is the one piece of technology or innovation you wish that more people knew about today that they don't know about?
I think there is some very good tech out there. I don't think there's anything that I'd be like, must have.
Must know about that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of the samey type of stuff where, you know, one feature might be better than other, but kind of there's always a trade-off. And I don't think, you know, it's like the Apple phone effect. It's like, oh, you just must have that. I don't think that's in property yet.
That's a perfectly valid answer. You know, some people have said AI, connectivity, depends on the lens in which you look at. So,
well, so on that, like AI, yes.
But it's not.
But how?
Yeah.
And at the moment, everyone's like, oh, we'll just do AI agents. I'm like, what does that even look like?
Yeah.
And is that literally just building an API?
Yeah.
It's become a little bit of a marketing sham.
Yeah. We definitely
different conversation.
A different conversation. We'll probably another podcast for that. And the final question is, who should be leading the innovation drive? The landlord, the operators, or the occupiers?
I would say landlord, followed by operator, followed by agent.
Brilliant. Okay. Well,
that's the quick answer.
That's the quick answer and the quick question. So you got there in the end. But Kilian, look, thank you so much for this. I did know this was going to be a very entertaining conversation, and not controversial, but honest, I think is great. And it's great to see and experience and talk to landlords that are making the investment, standing behind it and driving it. And ultimately, the really most important part is seeing the value in it, as opposed to we've done it and we're not quite sure what the output is. I think the more lessons that you can share about the things that did work and didn't, and shining lights on the right questions to ask and articulating the value which drives value is the bit that, you know, hopefully there's more people that follow suit, but not too quickly. So you guys still got your market advantage. But yeah, thanks so much for your time, and yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No worries.